Welcome. Hello. How's everyone doing? Welcome. It is another episode number 44 of Mysterious Forces Live. Thank you for joining me. I hit 425 subscribers today. That's peanuts compared to some broadcasters, of course, but it's good news for me. So I'm creeping up towards that 500 mark. Hopefully that'll happen sometime soon. So I was instructed last week to make sure that I point down and say like and subscribe and hit the bell so you get notifications. So I'm doing it this week. I'm pointing down and I'm asking you to like and subscribe. Thank you so much. I know you already know that, so I'm preaching to the choir on that. I hope you've had a great week. I've had a great week. I'm full of energy. I've been feeling better. I've been riding my dirt bike for recreation and exercise, and it's getting me up and moving, and I'm feeling better because of it. So I'm going to take a look here. I see Sasha Baumel. I see UFO Gandalf and UFO Galadriel. Thank you for being here. I welcome you. Thank you. Pursuing X will be here. They're taking care of an important errand, and I know that they're finishing up and they'll be here. And tonight I am having a guest. I am having Mr. Rich Hoffman, and he's a board member of the Scientific Coalition for Ufology. And I hear him, and he's had a technical problem. I could see him and hear him, or I could see him and hear him, and he could see me, but he could not hear me.
I hear you.
He hears me. All right, we are in business. So I apologize for this glitchy beginning. Mr. Hoffman, if you'll hold on just a second, I'll give you a proper introduction, and
Okay.
I'll finish my little introduction here. Tomorrow night, I am not going to be live. I'm either going to present a pre-recorded show that I will do tomorrow, or it will be a pre-recorded or a show with a guest rather, or it'll be a show with just myself because we were kind of short-sighted. I got my partner Billy Joel tickets for Christmas, and I just happened to look at the calendar, and suddenly tomorrow is the Billy Joel concert. So I'll be down in Phoenix seeing Billy Joel with her tomorrow. And of course you will have a show, and it will be a new show. And I just told you the circumstances. So anyway, tune in for that one tomorrow. I had Sabrina Campbell on last week, and she was really great. And I enjoyed having her on. And I want to have her back on again soon because we had a long conversation after we went off the air. And it was very interesting. And I know that her and I have a lot more conversations to have. And so without much further ado, since we've had a little bit of a shake up on our start here, I'm going to give a proper introduction to Rich Hoffman. As I mentioned, he's a board member of the Scientific Coalition for Ufology. And we're definitely going to dig into what they're all about. He hails from Dayton, Ohio. He's an Army veteran, and he currently lives in Alabama. And he's also part of a conference. If it's not his conference, I don't know. We'll have him explain. But there's a conference coming up in Huntsville, Alabama, and it's the Scientific Conference on Anomalous Aerospace Phenomena. And it runs from Friday, March 15th, until Sunday, March 17th. And the keynote speaker is none other than Luis Elizondo. So you can tell that they have some heavy hitters on their roster, and you can tell they have a heavy hitter as their keynote speaker, so they must mean business. I can tell you that the Scientific Coalition for Ufology made a big splash on the scene when they did research on the 2013 Aguadilla Puerto Rico case, which showed that small UFO through a military camera And not only was it going along the shoreline, but it also went across land at some points as well as the ocean. So it did both of those things. Rich Hoffman, welcome to Mysterious Forces Live. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be on with you.
I love it. So can you, we'll jump right in. I want to tell you, I know that I kind of reached out to you, and most likely you're really not familiar with the content of my show. However, I just want to assure you that I lean very heavily on the nuts and bolts science side of ufology, and I really kind of try to tiptoe around the woo-woo side of it. So you're in the right place on this show, because we are very much interested in facts, evidence, and analysis. So you are a breath of fresh air here, and most welcome. Can you tell us a little bit about the Scientific Coalition for Ufology? And we'll just start from there.
Yeah, it's let me clarify. You mentioned that we got started with the Aguadilla case in 2013. Most of us that got started with the SCU organization were just a faction, a part of MUFON. Okay. I was the state director of Alabama, and I was also playing at the deputy director of investigations role at the corporate level, or the headquarters level. And then there was Robert Powell, and he was the director of research. You have Larry Cates, who was he was on the science review board. Carl Paulson was also on the science review board. You had Morgan Bell, who was the Florida state director. And what happened to us was we got a case this case came up through a contact that Morgan knew, Diana Chaviano, that basically became aware of this Aguadilla case through a pilot over in, I guess it was in Miami. And the situation there was that he shared with her, or let her see a video clip that was given to him by the pilot that was actually in Aguadilla. And they were trying to find a place where they could take this thing that would treat it scientifically. In other words, really do the proper analysis on it. And they didn't want to go through UFO channels, although it kind of landed in that. But it came to us because we tended to be more of the scientific piece of the organization. We think that way. And we knew it was going to be typically more than a MUFON case where you're supposed to do it in 90 days and here's your results. And this is going to take longer because you now have a military grade thermal image camera that's about 3 minutes and 54 seconds long. And we're going to have to really spend some time on this. So we did. We basically spent 2 years on it. And then we put together a paper that was 167 pages long of just the pure science behind what we found. And so we kind of like were with MUFON, and we were just called ourselves a coalition, or just that's a way of us identifying ourselves. Well, the decision was at some point down the pike that we started to see MUFON separating itself from science and more into the woo-woo. Interesting term. And we kind of like all said, well, wait a minute, they're kind of damaging our credibility, with this woo-woo. And now I'm being, I would go on radio or something like that, or on Facebook, and somebody would say, oh, you're with that organization that believes that there's secret spaceships and stuff like that. Well, we said, no, we don't. And a lot of us just decided that we're going to leave. And it was extremely hard for me because I've been with them since they were the Midwest UFO network in 1969 and 70. So anyway, we made a decision that we're just going to go out and start our own scientific group. And the same group carried on. And then what happened was we said, well, we're a coalition. Let's go out and expand to other scientists and people who think like this. And so now we've got over 40, maybe 45 people, 12 PhDs, and all of us have degrees or something of that nature. And we all think that scientific thing is the important thing to do. and most of us all have been in this phenomenon for a long time. I'm sure you've heard of Kevin Randall, Kevin's part.
Yes.
A lot of us have been in this for a very, very long time. I've been in it for 55 years. And we've all wanted to have a scientific treatment of this thing. And it's only recently you're starting to see these like kind of videos where you're getting solid data that if you've ever seen any of those like thermal image cameras and stuff like that, there's a lot of data on that screen, the metadata and stuff. So we wanted to be able to have time to look at that. So that's kind of like how we got started.
Okay. No, that's everything you're saying is music to my ears. I love people who want to adhere to the scientific method. I think it's so important to the credibility of ufology.
Yes,
so I just want you to know that I feel warm and fuzzy when you talk about it that way. I know that's an emotional response, but I just feel like this is such an important topic and it needs serious treatment. And I think people who spin yarns and tell stories and tell fantastical tales, I think that they just damage ufology. And I'm going to admit, until recently, I didn't hear anything about your convention. And had I known about it in advance, due to the nature of it, I probably would have been attending it. It's a little bit short notice for me at this point. But how did the conference come about? And is this the first conference, or is this one in a long chain of conferences?
So let me clarify to you that I held, with MUFON, I held the 1978 MUFON Symposium in Dayton, Ohio. And we had 3,500 people that came.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a wow, right?
Yeah.
That's how popular this thing was. Okay, well, when I had done that, and I thought, well, you know, it'd be great to have a conference here. I work over at Redstone Arsenal for the Army Material Command headquarters, and I thought, wouldn't it be nice if we had, you know, that kind of thing here, right? And especially with all these military and all the NASA's here, you got Marshall Space Flight Center here, and I thought,
right, wow, Pat,
yeah. So let's have this thing here, you know, and so bottom line is I mentioned it to a number of the SCU members, and they said, yeah, that would be great, let's do it. And so consequently, we kind of like, I think it was around maybe September of last year, October-ish, that I said, let's go forward and do it. And I committed to having it done. And at that time I said, let's make it, you know, in the March time frame. And I kind of like looked around to see if that's a good time for the people around the area. And it was, and okay, let's go with it. And so it's our first conference. I've set this thing up in such a way that it's just right outside of the gate of the Redstone Arsenal.
That's awesome.
And I've been, you know, publishing it over on the Arsenal, and I've been publishing it in the whole community of Huntsville. And we're, you know, something that, you know, to let you know is that we're celebrating the 50th anniversary of the landing on the moon. Well, this is where those rockets and von Braun were. And so you have all that rich history. And I thought, wow, this would be great. So anyway, bottom line is I started advertising for it on the base because I was trying to get to the base personnel. I want them to come out and hear a bunch of scientists talking about UFOs and treating this thing with respect. You know, and honestly having a collaboration that they could ask questions and we could answer, and we could talk about the data that's out there and how do we improve getting data and that type of thing. Well, don't you know that we had the government shutdown?
Right.
So now these people can't afford to even come, you know, that type of thing. So I'm getting some. I mean, I guess what I'm trying to get at is, but it became really a challenge to try to be able to get people to come. And more and more, while we were trying to reach scientists to be able to do this, we kept having ufologists or people that, you know, call themselves that, that wanted to come. And then we're caught in this thing like, well, we don't want to get this to be a Comic-Con. We don't want it to be that. We want to talk science. And so how do we do that when we've got people that are not scientists, you know? And so it's been a struggle, but it's going, but it's turning out great. We've got some incredible people coming. I got a lot of professors that are coming from around the country, which is good. We've got
feel free to drop some names, please.
Yeah, well, no, I mean, so we've got besides our presenter Kevin Knuth, we've got Zedegas, a colleague of his that's going to be coming, and he was actually going to be, we were considering him as a possible speaker. We tried to get Silvano Colombano. I don't know if you know Dr. Colombano, but he's the one that kind of like was at NASA Ames Research Center and was actually going to talk about the fact that, you know, hey, I do this SETI work, but we need to start looking at UFOs. And we tried to get him to come here, and it became a problem where NASA wouldn't let him, and he became controversial because ufologists were going out and saying, oh, look, here's a UFO guy, you know, that type thing. And then it became a challenge for him, so we lost him. Until recently, George Knapp was going to be here. George has to do a radio show that same weekend, and the station wouldn't help him to get to this. And we've got, you know, a lot of the people, like besides Robert Powell is connected to a lot of people that are that helped put together a lot of the UFOs and Government, the book that he wrote.
Okay.
And so a lot of those people, that they call them the Kalamazoo group, that's going to be coming. We've got, geez, I mean, I can't even begin to think of all of the different people that I've got on the list that I've looked at. We have people coming, like a guy named Lee Dines that's from the UK.
Okay.
We've got people coming from Peru. The other day I got a call from Jaime Maussan. He was wanting to come, but he couldn't do it. That was wild. But anyway, I guess what I'm trying to say is that there's a tremendous number of people that are coming from all different parts of the United States and even the world now.
Right. So this by definition is a world-class conference.
Exactly. And you know, the amazing thing for me is that many people are referring to this as being historic. And I thought, well, you know, it's okay if that's what you want to call it, but to them, this is historic because many of us ufologists have been asking for this for a very, very long time, right?
Right.
And it needs to have that serious treatment, and we just struggle with that all the time. And so I'm glad if they want to call this historic, and yeah, I want to do it again. I think we'll do it again. And part of the conversation we're going to be having on Sunday is just that very thing. Where do we go next? What do we do next? How do we make this better, different, or change some things? And should it be here? Should it be somewhere else? Do we now go over to the West Coast and get the Navy on board and get outside of a Navy base? Or you know what I'm saying, right?
Right.
Well, right now, I mean, we're outside of the base where missile defense agencies are, and you got high-tech companies like Boeing and things like that around here, Lockheed Martin, and they're all around here. And everything to do with space is here. So maybe we'll go and do it with the Navy.
Right.
But
no, I've been down through there. I've traveled on the 10 down through there, and the NASA Center down there has quite an impact locally. There's even that mock-up of the lunar lander that's at one of the rest stops there. I've stopped at that rest stop before, actually.
Have you?
And just to look at that lunar lander. So I've been down through there. As you say this, for me, it kind of begs the question I can't help but ask, is there some kind of a paradigm shift behind the scenes where in academia or the defense industry or the Defense Department, literally, where people can talk about UFOs and not get ridiculed and get fired and have their careers damaged like it might have been 20, 30, 40 years ago?
I would say that, you know, of course, I've been at this for a long time. I think that the interest that I saw back in the, like, you know, my early years with this in 65 and 70, like I said, you know, you had 3,500 people coming to a conference, right?
Right.
So and I was like living in Dayton, and it seemed like I was always on TV or radio. And the next thing I know is, there was such an interest that was there that the conversations we had were almost everybody were talking about it. And now, you got so much stuff going on, like the politics of the country going on, and then there's all the, nobody's been talking about it for a long time. And I guess what I would try to say to you that when if you look at my cube over at Army Material Command, it's completely decorated in alien paraphernalia.
Okay.
And I do that intentionally so that I can get a conversation going. And a lot of people will talk, and there's a lot of curiosity about it, but I wouldn't say that we're out of the closet yet. And I would also say that what is helping is the fact that you have Lou Elizondo and the Pentagon releases and the videos and that type of thing that are sort of helping to get it to where the credibility's been restored. We went from Blue Book dying, and then you had that period where there was nothing happening, and basically they said it's just a bunch of hooey, and they kind of like closed the project. Right. And now you got it coming back in, and it's like, oh, by the way, we've got this project at the Pentagon, and it's been funded by 3 senators. And by the way, it's been going on, and look at, and they've been collecting all this wonderful information, and here's a few glimpses of it, and you're going like, wow, great. And now they're even talking about congressional hearings. So you're starting to have a very serious dialogue, and I think that that's going to have an impact in the military world and in the other parts of the world.
Right. Do you think, is it your opinion that there are even more unpublicized black budget programs in existence, or do you take things at face value and think that this was what they were doing and the program is what it is?
I think that over the period of time that I'm here, let me clarify that I'm a defense contractor, so I work and I've been working there for like 25 years in this headquarters. It's kind of like when you think about the industrial complex, that you've heard that term, right?
Military industrial complex, yeah.
That's it. I mean, every depot, arsenal, that's all around the country. That's all connected into us. Well, what I would say to you is that that what I've basically seen is that there's this, how do I say it? It's kind of like there's a movement towards the defense of the country. We've talked about the fact that there are these threats in the air. There are people that are now starting to pay attention to it. You have the word about the Congress meeting. You hear about the fact that it's on the news, like it was back then. And there's this like shift that's going on in that regard to where it now feels comfortable again to be able to talk about it. And I find that now scientists, like we're getting people that are scientists that want to be a part of us, that have been kind of like out in that, Jacques Vallée talked about the invisible college. Mm-hmm. And the fact that there's these people that are out there doing it, and we're hiding it and we're talking about it much. And now I'm starting to see more and more of this discussion about it. So we're going to try and take that and frame it into a conversation so that we can now say, well, what do we need to do to go forward? How do we make this thing better? What kind of data can we get? What ideas do you have? And yes, I believe that there's always been these like SAP programs, special access programs that are out there. I think that a lot of the UFO stuff has always been shifted away from the government, and it's more in the defense contracting world. And that's where you're getting the real stuff that's going on out there that would be looking into the UFO phenomena. And so that the government person who says, well, I don't know anything about it, or if you give me a FOIA request, well, they aren't doing anything because it's Lockheed out there, or it's some other skunk works project or like thing going on. It's really doing that. Like, even with the ATIP program, it was Bigelow, right?
Right.
So, I mean, the government project manager or program manager might not know as much as they do,
Right.
You know where I'm going, right? So I believe that,
Oh,
yes,
yeah, right.
I believe
No, some of the mythology behind the scenes is that when they have privatized some of these programs, that actually helped add some extra layers of secrecy because these private companies don't have to be as transparent as government projects.
Precisely. And even if you look at the Aguadilla case that we did in 2013, here's what happened there. You had the control tower, which was a contractor, and it was a contractor out of I believe Tennessee, Robinson Aviation. And when we tried to put in a FOIA request to get the tower records, we couldn't get it. We went to the FAA and said, "Can you please give us the records of the control tower conversation and what they saw?" Right? Couldn't get it. Oh, they're a contractor. They're not required to provide that information to you. And so again, but yet here they are under a government contract, and you would expect them to be able to give you something, right? I mean, why wouldn't I hold a contractor to the same regard, especially if they're the people in the tower? So that's the kind of problems we have and the limitations we have. And yes, it's a great way to hide it. Shift it out into a defense world contractor, and you can keep doing this stuff until you're the cow comes home, I guess.
Right. Has anyone behind the scenes ever kind of done a wink and a nod to you to kind of unofficially maybe acknowledge that you're on the right track or doing the right kind of research, but they themselves couldn't quite detail anything due to their security clearance?
Yes. And the good thing about it is the fact that I've got a security clearance. And so we'll have sometimes conversations that I necessarily can't have outside of my work. You know what I'm saying? So
right.
It's a little bit more like, yeah, I can talk to you, but we need to be very careful about what we do. And so, I'm always in that like balancing act world where it's like, you kind of hesitate. You want to be able to say something, but you can't, or they've told you something that you can't, and it's like a catch-22 sometimes, and it could, it's difficult for a lot of us in that world, I guess is what I'm trying to say. But yeah, it's an ugly baby in that regard. But yeah, I've had people that have done that before. I've had people that said my job was to go in to do something, and I'm like, wow, that you did that? That's wild. And they'll tell you some incredible stuff, and you'll go like, okay. I did one time. I was in Dayton, and I was called into a TV station, and I went into the TV station, and I was told that there was like somebody that wanted to meet me. And they had seen me on television, and they said, "I want to talk with that Rich Hoffman guy." Okay, no problem. Well, anyway, the bottom line is that we were in this glass enclosed room, and the producer that I knew brought me into the room, and I was sitting there, and there was a man that was over there in a nice business suit and everything else. And I said, "Hi, I understand you wanted to meet me or to have a conversation." He said, "Yeah." And he mentioned his name, and he said that he was the chief of Aeromed research at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. I said, "Oh, okay. Well, what did you want to have a conversation about?" And that type of thing. And he said, "Well, the situation is I have a team of people that have been looking at the effects of us being in space. And over a period of time, our team has assembled the belief, or come to the accept that basically we would start to look like the aliens that are being reported."
I don't want to interrupt you. I have many times theorized about that if humans were to evolve in a space environment, that genetic result, that look of the grays would be the end result. I apologize so deeply, but that just for interrupting you, but that just really hit me hard. I've thought that many times. Please continue. I'm sorry.
No, but that's precisely what he was saying. And so you're spot on yourself in terms of just that notion about like, yeah, I mean, look at the effects in the of Commander Scott Kelly or what
correct.
I mean, he wrote that book about the effects of being in space and what it did to his body, and he's taking a hit on it now. But But anyway, he said that his team out at the base had researched it and said that we would start to look like those people if we were out there for a very long time. And I said, wow, that's kind of an interesting concept. They said, well, so what you're telling me are that possibly that it could be a situation, if you want to speculate on that a little bit, that maybe what we're doing is we're looking at ourselves coming back, and maybe it's a time machine as opposed to a spacecraft or an alien craft. Instead of them being aliens, we're looking at ourselves, and that this is, we're just basically looking at people that have been out there for a long time and maybe are, traversing the universe and are coming back, and they can maneuver through time. And I thought about that. I thought, and he seemed to say, yeah, that's kind of like where I'm going. And then we had another conversation, and he said I said, you are aware of crashes. You work at the base. Have you ever seen anything that basically was unusual in a crash site? Because we were talking at that time about crash retrievals. And he said, oh, yeah, I was on a crash site, and I found something that didn't have a backbone.
Wow.
And I said, really? And he was telling me there in the room that he had been doing that. And I'm going like, is this guy for real or what? And so I looked up his name. I talked with Leonard Stringfield, who was down in Cincinnati. And Len had some really good, strong connections to people at the base. And he basically got his phone number and started calling him. And then he clammed up. He didn't, no, I didn't say anything. So he wanted to have a conversation with me, but he didn't want to have a conversation with anyone but me. And so when I tried to do that, it seemed like we were shut off, and we never heard any more. And then later he disavowed knowledge of me completely, but that's all right. I'm telling you the straight story based upon my experience. I was like shocked with that whole thing. So.
Right. Well, sometimes, the truth doesn't have a buttoned up ending. Sometimes, you just get bits and pieces. And if I could add on my own opinion, I've often thought, I actually have imagined the very scenario that aliens could potentially be us from the future, evolved in space.
Yeah.
And if you want to stretch that out a little more, I've often thought that abductions or collection of biological material could be some kind of attempt to re-engineer their own DNA, or perhaps repair deficits that have occurred genetically over time. And so that this collection of genetic material might be a way for them to try to heal themselves. And I know that's, pure speculation, obviously, but it follows a logic chain. And I think that it's an interesting idea.
Well, you must be reading my mind, Natasha, because that's exactly where I've always been. If I can say that, to me, like, what makes the most sense, if you can make sense out of this nonsense we live in with this whole phenomena, that I tend to want to go with that kind of like notion more so than anything else. I tend to, but here's where even if you look at the Rendlesham case in the Bentwaters case in 1980, if you believe that Penniston actually went over and touched that and started to get ones and zeros, and if you really believe that the ones and zeros said that it's like an earthbound spacecraft from the future, and that's
right.
what the message basically said. It was a surveillance craft. Okay, well, that's from the future. Okay, so again, that little question about, is this for us from the future coming back, comes in. Then you have the cases like the ones that just fade in and fade out, or come in and just out of nowhere, and there they are. And then you have those odd kinds of things that are going on, like, well, even if you want to say crop circles, or if you want to say some of the other phenomena, like you mentioned, the animal mutilations. I've always looked at the mutilation cases, and I have investigated those, and I've seen really, really weird, strange stuff with the investigations of those. But I think you're spot on, because it seems to be that they're collecting tissue, soft tissue, organs. They're collecting blood, of course, from the animals. Most of them are completely exsanguinated, but there seems to be that, and then you have, if you listen very carefully and just stay back in the abduction world, it's, oh well, wait a minute, I'm out here creating babies, and I'm hybrid wood, and I'm out there doing the oh, by the way, your planet's going to blow up. Let me show you a screen where you're going to see that that's going to happen to you. And I go back to the fact that they're not harming it, even with the nuke cases. You know, the nuke cases. We're just saying, don't play with nukes, if you would.
Right. Absolutely.
I'm going to shut it off, and I'm going to show you that I can do that. Okay. Now stop it. Okay. And it's like little warnings. Like I have the hypothesis that says that they've always been here.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, throughout time, you know, any recorded time. Jacques Vallée would say that because he's looking at it's throughout recorded history, and other people would say that. And so, okay, they've always been here. We've always had a relationship with them. The craft seemed to be described differently, but that's because of the vernacular of the people and the culture at that time, you know?
Right, absolutely.
So Roman shields would look like Roman shields. Okay, well, that's great. Okay. Dirigibles, well, maybe some people were seeing blimps, you know, let's call them a blimp. But now, I mean, more and more, and I've investigated so many cases of things that are like, you know, objects the size of that ball behind you, objects the size of a baseball. You're talking about atmospheric phenomena that I've investigated that I can't explain. I'm doing that here in about an hour away from me right now in Cloverdale.
Okay.
But there are these kinds of things that we just don't understand. And they look more like what we would call drones as opposed to being manned or occupied. And when you take a look at the Nyxx case, here's an object that goes from 80,000 feet ceiling, and in less than 1 second, 0.78 seconds, is now stopping above the ocean.
Yes.
Not even 1 second. Okay. And it didn't heat up. It doesn't break the sound barrier. It, you know, the kinetic energy that would come off of that would have knocked everything out power wise. It's just, you know, not the G-force on that thing would have been huge. And it's, you know, and we're going to be talking about that. But I mean, but what explains that? Other than that, maybe it's not really kind of like there, maybe, or we're looking through. I don't know. I mean, it just breaks the laws of physics that we know, and what does that? And so, anyway.
Do you think that there could be an interdimensional element, that perhaps the universe as we think of it is, you know, much more like what superstring theory and the high strangeness of quantum mechanics would suggest, and that we live in a multi-dimensional universe, and perhaps this isn't even physical travel at all, but somehow interdimensional travel?
Yeah, and I do believe that you know, when you stand back and you look at all the different kinds of cases that I've had over, you know, and I've looked at, I was part of a team that looked at thousands of the MUFON cases. I've investigated personally about 1,000 cases, you know. When you actually go out and look at these things and you look at those descriptions and you try to say, well, what could possibly do that? And is it a physical craft? No. 1 minute it appears physical, next minute it doesn't appear physical. It has physical effects and it doesn't have physical effects. You know what I'm talking about. I see you shaking your head, but it's like,
yeah.
The 1 minute it's picked up on radar, the next minute it's not picked up on radar. Okay, so what has that ability to do that? And you know, and so you kind of sit back and you say, well, it's obviously something that we don't know yet. We haven't figured it out. We're still very much infants in our notions about even the universe that we live in and our place in it, or and we're just starting to figure out what other planets look like and how they function. And so we're very immature yet. I think that, you know, if you have a civilization that's been out there for the last 1,000,000 years, I don't care, even 100,000 years, they might have come up with, you know, capabilities way beyond us. And maybe they're out there sending robots like we are talking about sending robots out to go and look at things, and these are the robots that are coming and looking at us 1 minute. Or maybe they've figured out how to move through that multiverse string theory kind of concept and can change and manipulate space and time in such a way that they can do this. And I think that there's elements to that. And I think it's, you know, there may be even multiple of these explanations coming into play, you know, these hypotheses that we have. Maybe it's us that's doing it, and then maybe there's also some other people that are coming, or some are looking around, and why not? You know, maybe that's okay, you know. And so we just have little knowledge yet about what these things really are.
Right. I couldn't help but think of the nature of a photon, where we have observed and researched that it acts as a particle and a wave.
Yeah.
And that kind of lends this credence to this concept of something that is physical and yet not physical at the same time, sometimes simultaneously.
Yeah, precisely. And that's a good analogy for it, because it's a situation very much like that. Well, wait a minute, this doesn't make sense. Or it doesn't make sense how, if you can't move faster than the speed of light, well, how does that particle over here entangle with the other particle that's at a distance? And you don't see anything happen, but it's instantaneous in terms of its ability to change or alter its spin in a different direction because you did it over here. So what makes that happen? And then, you know, we keep coming back to, in science, and this is where we need to get better at it, a lot of people are passing around their great video clips that they're taking in the visible range. The spectrum is rather large. You know, so when you get into infrared, you get into, you know, microwave and all, and you take a look at that whole spectrum, it's infinite. You're saying, well, wait a minute, we're just looking at these objects with these like limited eyes and these things, and we're not looking at what they look like or they consist of in these other ranges of the spectrum. Well, they might look quantitatively different. So I think that's where we need to go with the study, and we need the tools to be able to do that. And some of these like video clips that I'm talking about that we're getting are in the thermal range, to where you're actually starting to see what these heat signatures are like around them. And that's great information for us to get.
How can we as civilians find some solutions to access to these tools? Because a lot of this thermal imaging, as I understand it, the cameras for the planes are super expensive, and a lot of this is Defense Department equipment, or maybe at best university equipment or large installation equipment that is funded by governments or the defense industry. How can we get this quality of equipment into the hands of private civilian researchers so that they have a fair shot at analyzing and capturing some of the same evidence? Excellent question.
And let me give you some responses. Okay. So I mentioned that I was doing this investigation of this phenomena that's west of me in Cloverdale. It's a phenomena that's kind of like Hestilin. And it's like some of the Marfa lights, and it's that type of thing. I don't believe that it's anything. It's not anything like extraterrestrial, but it's a phenomena that exists out there that's rather interesting to look at. And you're trying to say, well, what is this made of? It's a glowing ball of light, kind of like that light behind you. And imagine that ball. It's about 8 foot in diameter, and it's moving against the wind. And it's going up to altitudes like about maybe even as much as 2,000 feet altitude. And you're going like, what made that thing glow? What made it, why is it not being affected by the wind? What is it made out of? Well, okay, so let me give an example of the kinds of things we're doing with just basic tools. For one thing, most everybody's got these kind of things nowadays.
Absolutely.
And let me tell you about these things. I can get right now a thermal imaging camera it's called Seek, and it's maybe a couple $100, and I can attach it to this thing, and now I've got a means of getting thermal range. I can go get a small little lens to put on my camera, and it's got a little diffraction grating on it, and now I can get the spectrum. Okay. So I want to take it, I want to get that rainbow effect of what I'm taking. So you can take your camera and you can put that kind of like diffraction grating and get that kind of thing. Well, what is that going to tell me? Well, because I can take that spectrum image and I can break it down and I can define what its chemical composition is.
Oh, wow.
Okay. So now I can tell you, and this is what they did in Hestel, and they had that diffraction grating and that kind of a camera that you can get, and the lens isn't very costly, but they were able to tell that it was made up of iron, it was made up of sulfur, it was made up of nitrogen, oxygen, and it had scandium in it.
Wow.
Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So that's an example, because now we went to spectral images. We don't want that visible. We want that spectral to know what the chemical composition is. I mean, we're doing that for stars right now. I mean, and planets. We're looking for planets, and we take spectra from them. But that's not a costly thing. The other thing is I can go up here to the Home Depot, and I can rent a thermal imaging kind of like device, and I might be able to use that very, very cheaply. We were using also, I'm sure you've seen it, but you can get baseball people will recognize this. You can go get a little radar gun, and it's a little handheld thing, and now you can get the speed of the object, right?
Oh, okay.
So let's see what else is going. I've got a drone. My friend's got a drone. We're actually taking our drones and trying to fly up and see if we can't get next to these and circle around them.
Oh, that would be cool.
So go ahead.
No, I was just, I've kind of been waiting, and perhaps it exists and I'm ignorant of it. I've been waiting to see someone who got hooked up an infrared camera to a drone and did some nighttime stuff instead of all the daytime footage that we seem to see.
We're doing that.
Okay.
You can attach, if you get a simple drone, you can go and attach like different kinds of cameras or sensors or various other things to it. Or you can attach a sensor to this thing to be able to have it help give me some information on its electromagnetic effects. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is you can do those kinds of things. And it's becoming more and more cost effective for John Q. Public to go out and help us to get better data. I'm sure you've seen tri-field meters. Well, you can get, I can start, you do use them for ghost hunting. You can go just for a short, a couple $100 or something like that, or even less. You can go get those EMF meters, and that would help us to get data. I guess that's the kind of thing is that there's all of this technology that's coming out there that's now we need to help get data, because that's what scientists want. When you give me just testimony about your case, that doesn't cut it. If you give me testimony and maybe a video, well, videos can, are mostly blurred and they or something like that, or they're not, the camera's not good for taking it at night, and so now you get just a light. Well, whoop-de-doo,
Right.
If I had more than that, like the spectrum, I would at least know what the light's made out of, So we as citizens have got to become better at getting data so that we can take to the scientists and say, here, go and measure that, and now let's see if we can get smarter about what that thing was that you saw.
Right. Shifting gears a little bit, can you tell me about any cases that may not get the love in terms of publicity that a lot of the bigger, more well-known cases get? Are there some more, how do I phrase this? I don't know, just more low-key cases or ones that haven't been publicized that have fantastic evidence that are kind of like pet cases for you?
I would guess, I've had some interesting cases where I've had people that have, in other words, you might have a situation where you've got people in 2 or 3 different positions who are all now seeing the same thing, and they're taking videos and they got their GPS location so I can triangulate the object, and so where you got that kind of data now from multiple scenes. So if I have multiple witnesses taking photographs, I can triangulate it where it's at. I can get a lot of information. I can get its speed. I can get a whole lot. Those are the kinds of cases that are really exciting to me. The other case, like in 2013, I was looking into a case where a pilot was taking off in Mississippi, and he happened to be coming along and flying. It was a nice clear day. He was about 2,000 feet up in the air, going maybe 254 miles an hour. And it was a small Piper kind of plane, that type of thing. And he happens to look over to his right because there was like some sort of light or something. He looks over, and right underneath his wing was a perfect disc-shaped object that was about 4 foot in diameter. It was right underneath his wing, and he was following along with him. And then he looked, and it starts to then backing up and going away behind him. And he was like, "What did I just see?" He didn't see any kind of no propulsion system, no vents on it, no nothing like that. It was just a complete, like two hubcaps that were put together, right? That's what it was.
Lenticular.
Well, the interesting thing about that was that we then said, let's see if we can find the FAA radar sites that were around there. So we went and got basically we went out and we got, I think, 6 different sets of data, and only one of them caught the plane. And then there was one in Alabama that actually caught this object that was moving around where that plane was. And so now we were able to track what that object did when it went backwards. It kind of dropped in its speed. It stopped a couple times, shifted its direction, went 120 degrees in one way and then shifted another way. And it slowed down from the 250 mile speed that it was with the plane to next to like 35 miles an hour. And so, it's cases like that, Natasha, that make it really interesting, because now you've got some sort of confirmation by another kind of device, like a radar or something like that helps you to, and those are, to me, very exciting when you have that. The pilot was like really, really credible. He knew what he was looking at, and we were just validating his story. And there's so many of those kind of cases, and then there's so many cases that people just don't talk about. They may have taken something, or they may have, who knows? They may have had their audio, and they might got an audio recording, and they don't even know it. So
right.
And they won't tell anybody, or if they do tell somebody, that they'll tell somebody that's left. So it's the unspoken cases often that are very curious when we do talk about it, and then we can actually get some other kind of information. Like I was able to track down additional witnesses that saw the same thing that the person did, and that's kind of neat. But that's what I would share with you, that we see some people that really do that level of work and help us out.
Right. Okay. Yeah, no, that's great. That's good information. In the same way that inroads are being made into academia or into the defense industry, and by defense industry, I mean the actual military itself as well. Yeah. In the same way that some inroads and maybe we might even be able to optimistically say some level of acceptance of this type of research or evidence within those circles, do you see any chance for inroads to, say, the pilots unions or any other organizations that have clamped down so hard on pilots in the past, where perhaps pilots and radar technicians and other people who work in the airline industry can come forward and say something without, like we talked about before, damaging their careers or being silenced?
I think that that's where we're going to start to see a big change. And I say that because when you have somebody like a Commander Fravor, who was the head of the Black Aces for the Nimitz case, and the guys out there saying that I saw this, I did this, and then we get other like cases where that you have these pilots are saying, look, something was out there that was following us, or we couldn't figure out what was. And there's these radar not radar, but radar confirmation. But there's also, now they're getting the tape recordings of their conversation, or I say tape, but recordings of it, of their conversations. I think that what's happening is that there's going to be this change in that's going to happen, where we now get people wanting to report it more, to talk about it more, and they need to feel comfortable about where they can go. And when I was talking with Lou Elizondo, he was talking about the fact that it looks like the government's going to get back into the UFO collection business, and if that's true, my hope is that it won't be another blue book, but it will be a situation where they do have a hotline that allows people to talk and to share that stuff, and that it can be treated in such a way that it's not like I'm taking it's swamp gas. There's no quick answers, that you're really going to do the due diligence to study this, and you're going to come out with some sort of like periodic things similar to the reports that were with the OSAP program, like maybe the 38 DIA types of documents. Give me something serious. Show me that there's really something legit behind it. You've practically come out and said that that's the case. There are things out there that we don't know. I want a conversation with that. And I want you to come out and be clean and honest and direct, and also to listen to those pilots who are telling you that they're out there that they're having something that's flying up next to their aircraft or whatever. And I think that Dick Haynes with NARCAP was trying to do that, and he was doing a great job, and I was sad to see him get out of it. But he was collecting all those pilots' cases, and fabulous work that he's done.
Are there any contemporary ufologists whose work you follow and respect that, in your opinion, stands above maybe some of the charlatans or less reputable people out there?
Yeah, I happen to value people like the Kevin Randalls, who does that due diligence in terms of that strong investigative work. I value the work that's been even done by many of the people on SCU, Robert Powell, and then we don't. I tend to follow. Well, I've always been interested, and I knew Stanton Friedman. I try to pay attention to what he's saying, because he's got a lot of good stuff and good ideas. I do respect a lot of other. How do I say it? More like the scientists. We have one of the presenters we have is Travis Taylor. I don't know if you know of Travis. He's got like 3 PhDs. Wow. The guy is incredible. He's basically all over the base here. He's worked for NASA. He had a show that was on TV that was called Rocket City Rednecks, but he did science.
Okay. Yeah.
And he was doing a lot. A guy like that, I have a deep respect for as well, because I mean, he knows the science out there that's doing it. I have a deep respect for Dr. Bruce Maccabee and the work that Bruce has done over the years. These people are I hold in high regard for their level of science that they apply to it in the work that they've done. And Dick Haynes, I mentioned, and stuff like that. So yeah.
And I would have to toss onto that list the data research of Cheryl Costa, and also what John Greenwald does with the Black Vault and making all the documents available online. I think they have done a lot for ufology.
I wrote the foreword for Cheryl's book.
Okay. All right.
So I wrote the foreword to it. And yeah, it's that kind of work that's very, very valuable, that people do that level of statistical collection and that analysis. I mean, we just don't, we need more of those kind of people that want to take the time like Cheryl and Linda did to spend all that time getting the counties right, looking through 2 different databases and trying to peel that onion back and say, well, what's going on, you know, and collecting that. So yeah, you're hitting the same people that I would too as well. I think that we need more of that type of support.
Right. And this is not a trick question. I don't do ambush journalism, and I'm asking you this with all due respect. What would your response be to any detractors that didn't want to trust your word because you are admittedly working in the defense industry, that you're a defense contractor? What would your retort be to those skeptics?
Well, I mean, let's put it this way. I'm a skeptic as well. I mean, so my response back is you have to be skeptical about all this whole phenomena. You know, you can't just blindly accept everything that you hear without doing the due diligence to check into it. And let me also clarify that I'm not in the military. I'm a defense contractor.
Correct.
That doesn't mean that I'm bound by everything that a civilian would. And at the same time, I've dedicated since my age 13, the whole subject of UFOs has been where I've been. And I don't mince words about it. And I also happen to, I admire truthfulness, integrity, and people being honest. And I try to be that to my best ability, you know, and I put it as clearly and as objectively as I possibly can, from my view, anyway. And I'm honest to say that it's my view. So I would just say to you that just because I'm in the DoD doesn't mean that people are dishonest or that you shouldn't necessarily believe them. I don't believe that at all that that's the case in my experience with these people. The civilians that I work with are exceptional people trying to do their damnedest to be able to help defend the country. And that's what they're about. And so why wouldn't we respect that kind of thing? I've dedicated my 25 years as in the Army to be able to help defend the country, help soldiers get food, bullets, and anything else that they need to be able to help us out.
Right.
I will continue to do that because I believe that we need to have that integrity and concern about our country. And I work in the IT world, and I'm extremely concerned about China getting all of our whatever, or any other country getting our secrets. And suddenly you see that same drone that we're building being built over in their country. So I just try to be honest like that. And if they don't want to accept anything they say, or they can't, but that's too bad. But the bottom line is I'm trying to give you my best and honest opinion.
Right. No, I appreciate that. And I just want you to know that wasn't coming from me personally. I'm asking that tough question because I know someone out there is going to make noise about that. And I thought I'd just, for a bit of journalistic integrity, ask that question. And I love your response. I think it was perfect. And as I move towards winding down the show, we have blown through an hour, which is incredible. This is one of the best hours of this show yet. This is episode number 44, and this one is up there on my list.
Thank you.
I have a little bit in common. I grew up in East Central Indiana, pretty close to Dayton, and I used to go to Hara Arena to go to concerts, and I had a grandfather that lived in Huber Heights and over in Eaton. And so all those little towns between Dayton and East or West Central Indiana, East Central Indiana. Geez. I'm from Richmond, Indiana. So I grew up watching WHIO out of Dayton with Don Wayne and that whole bit. So
I just want to tell you, the guy that's doing my slides is a friend of mine over at the base. He's from Richmond, Indiana. And
wow.
So so I was just with him. I left him to come here. And
wow.
I'm actually a Hoosier myself because I was born in Jasper, Indiana, down south.
Okay, I know where that is. Yeah. So yeah, we have a little bit of that going. That mutual thing. So I understand that whole Midwestern thing. It kind of blows me away to now kind of be into the field and think back to being so close to being around Wright Pat. And even I had locally heard stories where people had seen exotic aircraft locally around Richmond. And because, Richmond's about, 45 miles away from Dayton. And it seemed that a lot of aircraft, that's about where some of them would bank their turns to go back towards Wright Pat. It's just that far out. And I personally know people who saw exotic aircraft that was completely off the books and denied. And I personally witnessed one time a sonic boom while in Richmond, and everyone everywhere denied any existence of anything that could cause a sonic boom. But we all knew it. I mean, hundreds, thousands of people heard it and felt it. And, being that close to Wright Pat, it's like, come on, we all know better. I get it. But I want to thank you for your service to our country for one thing as well. Thank you so much for serving, and thank you for continuing to support the interests of security for America. I deeply appreciate that myself.
Thank you.
And I know that my audience does too. The Scientific Conference on Anomalous Aerospace Phenomena, are there still tickets available? And if so, where can people get tickets to this engaging conference?
All right. Well, thank you. It's going to be closed. The ticket sales are going to close on Monday. I intentionally left it open just because I was going to be on this show.
All right.
We're going to close it today, as a matter of fact. So if you would like to, you can go up and I'll give you this, write it down or whatever. But it's basically Explore SCU, which is Scientific Coalition for explorescu.org, and then put a / and then put AAPC.
All right, we'll have that link in our chat room and elsewhere, so folks can find that there. And so in the Huntsville area, are there still hotel rooms available, so on and so forth? If they get their tickets and they're interested, there's lodging and everything else nearby that they need?
Lodging, and the beauty of this is that I've got it such a low price point that it's, imagine you're going to go for a conference, it's $175, but that gives you 4 meals.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Most of the cost of this thing is actually going to give you the meals and the venue. And it's a beautiful venue. It's all decorated in Von Braun, kind of like pictures and everything else. And you can actually see the Saturn V rocket outside the window. But it's including all of your soft drinks and non-alcoholic beverages you want over the days. And we got 4 buffet meals that we're serving, and that's all for $175.
That's amazing. And I want to look right at the camera and talk to my audience. Do you hear that, people? This is what happens when you get a real conference with scientists and you're not lining the pockets of George Norrie and David Wilcock. You get 4 meals and you get real science and real evidence, and you don't get smoke blown up your derriere. So that's why everyone should be interested in the Scientific Conference for Anomalous Aerospace Phenomena.
Profit. We're not looking to milk everybody's pocketbooks either. So,
right. No, it's awesome. I totally believe in what you're doing. I just want to let you know, I am very enthusiastic about you, having talked to you. I'm enthusiastic about your work. I'm enthusiastic about the SCU because for me personally, this is what I look for in ufology. I want to see good evidence and good analysis, and I want to hear smart people giving that analysis, and this is what you guys are doing. So I want to thank you so much for just creating a sense of credibility and believability for this field, which takes so many dings because there's so many dingbats around the periphery of it, giving it a bad name. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you. And thanks you for recognizing that.
Yes. Rich Hoffman, you are welcome back on the show anytime. Thank you so much. And there's the happy music. So I'm going to talk you out. The Scientific Conference on Anomalous Aerospace Phenomena, Friday, March 15th through Sunday, March 17th. I'm starting to wonder if I don't need to buy a ticket and go down to Huntsville, Alabama. I'm serious. I'm really excited about this. So this is great. I hope you enjoyed this. This is the kind of stuff that I want on this show, as opposed to the crap you're going to find on some of the other shows. So keep that in mind. Anyway, I want to give a shout out to Jimmy, Mika, Sarah, recover from your surgery. I love you. Kelly Farmer, you'll be okay. It's all right. CW, you're pretty intense, but I love you too. The professor, everyone else that's associated with the show, thank you so much, and tune in next time. Bye.